was 1,800 miles away. And I was only a little over a year out from losing my brother. And so I think that I just was reeling still, trying to figure out who I was on the other side of this. And then I have water polo too, that's been this like
big part of your identity.
Big part of my identity. And so then when I wasn't playing anymore, it was like I had an identity crisis, and I was like, who am I if I'm not the best water polo player in the room? Like, who am I without these things? And so
there's actually something else I was going to ask you about, because you had almost been born into HNW and gone there your whole life. So when you left home and got to Indiana, was there was that on your list of priorities, was to find a church and to plug in and get with some like-minded believers?
it was, well, that's not true. It was on my parents' list of priorities, and I knew that it should be on mine, but I didn't make it a priority. And so I remember going to church the first Sunday that I was there, and I didn't know where I was going. I was a freshman. I didn't know where all the buses went. I knew where the church was. My dad had done the work before I went to school and found these are the churches that like are aligned with our beliefs that you would probably feel comfortable going to, those kinds of things. And so he had done all the work for me. And I remember the first Sunday was like, I'm going to go to church, because I had heard for years, like, you got to get plugged into a church, especially in college. And, you got to go right away and, all these things. And so I remember trying to get to the church, and I didn't know where I was going. I took the wrong bus, and I remember being so late for the service. I think I walked in and there was maybe 5 or 10 minutes left in the entire service.
Oh no.
I was like sweaty and gross because it was like August in Indiana, and I was like hot, and I just sat at the back, and I ended up sitting on the row with a bunch of the soccer team. And at IU, they were like 7-time national champions. And I didn't know who they were. I didn't know I was supposed to be impressed by them. But apparently I was supposed to be. And so I sat on the back row with a bunch of guys, of course. And they were really kind. And they went back to the dorm because, of course, the upperclassmen always talk the freshmen into taking them to lunch because they can use our food meal points to go get lunch. And so they had talked all the freshmen into taking them to lunch, and they were going to my dorm for lunch. So I remember sitting with them and chatting with them afterwards. And then I didn't make it a priority again. And that was really a weird thing, because I had never in my life not gone to church every Sunday. It was not an option for us to go to church. Wednesdays, Sundays, all of it. It was never an option for me. And so that was a weird time to not be plugged into a church. And again, figuring out who I am.
Do you think that not being grounded in a church had anything to do with your decision to quit?
Probably.
What was the deciding factor that ultimately, because did you just quit water polo or quit school altogether?
Both. I quit both. Water polo specifically I didn't enjoy it anymore. I was starting to hate it, and I did not want to hate it. It was something that I loved, that had been a lifeline for me for a long time, and I was starting to hate it. I didn't like it anymore, and I didn't want to stop playing because I hated it. And so I just thought, I'm gonna get there. And so at least I had the awareness to know that was where I was headed, and that's not what I wanted. And so I quit water polo. And so because I quit water polo, I, of course, am not going to be able to go to school at an out-of-state school and pay all of that money. And so what I decided to do was I decided to live and work in Indiana for a year, because if you live and work there for a year, you can try to get in-state tuition. And so I said, okay, well, this is what I'm going to do, because I still want to go to school at Indiana. And what was funny was that when I got back after the summer of my sophomore year and I went back to Indiana, and I got a job. I lived in an apartment with a friend, and I started working at an optometrist's office, and I was working to get my in-state tuition, and that's what I was working towards. And that was when I joined a church for the first time. I remember going on a Sunday morning, and they had signups they called them C groups, which was community groups. They had signups for C groups on a table. I just picked one, and I said, this is the one I'm going to go to. And I signed up for it right away. And I got involved right away. And from then on, it was like, I was there all the time. I was in a C group. I was there every Sunday morning. And that ended up being the way that the Lord introduced me to my best friends was through that group.
So, as opposed to a lot of people who like make these amazing lifelong friends in college, you made yours in church after quitting college.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Let's go back to this crisis of identity. It sounds like this was like a big thing that you had to work through. What, where did you get to with that when you were wrestling with that whole thing, who you are?
I think after I quit and I came home for the summer,
Did your parents know you quit?
yes,
Okay.
I called them and I had told them before I quit that I was going to quit.
Okay.
And to their credit, they were always just very supportive of me. They never made me feel guilty or shame about it. It was just kind of like, okay, well, what are we going to do now? Like, it was kind of like, okay, that's fine. What are you going to do now? And so it was great to have their support. And I came home for the summer and I still coached and I played over the summer and I got to do it in an environment that I loved again over the summer. And so that was really wonderful. And then that summer was really, again, when the Lord was like calling me back and was like, you don't know who you are because you're not listening when I tell you who you are. You're not seeking me to tell you who you are. I'm the only one, Sarah, who can tell you who you really are. And I think for me also, a message that I received, not explicitly as growing up, was I would receive love if I was the best. And so then being taken out of the context of being the best, I'm not the best at anything anymore because I don't even play anymore. And, and I had been the best for all this time. And it was like the Lord was like, yeah, because that was never who